Hello and welcome to Come to Think of It, the podcast diary program on Bizz 99.9 FM Substitute Radio. I'm Gerik, no Deall, today's diarist. Thank you for joining me. There are problems with Australian politics and the Australian political organisations and methodology. First of all, our referendums are designed so poorly that it's almost impossible to pass a constitutional amendment. Around 25% of all referendums have been successful, which is appalling considering how much work and money is put towards a single referendum actually happening. Constitutional conventions, which quite frankly are nothing but pseudo-intellectual and fat cat capitalist feel-good sessions with cheap lobbying and partisan rhetoric, no actual political and contextual organisation whatsoever, media advertisements, hours of legislative management, parliamentary debates, hiring polling stations and printing voting cards. And secondly, why is it taking so long for an R18 plus rating for video games to be created in Australia? The hardcore, professional and passionate video game industry and community of this country have been long unhappy at this current situation, where video games are treated differently to other media forms, and have been pushing forward with campaigns to have this policy alteration happen. We need R-rated games on Australian shores. Quote, the highest classification for video games is MA 15+. Adult games with a high level of violence, sex, or drug use cannot be approved for sale, sold, imported, or advertised in Australia. End quote, Herald Sun. It would be very easy to do. All it would take is to bring video games on equal standing with all other entertainment mediums, such as books and films. Quote, bring in an R18+ rating would require all of Australia's Attorneys General to agree, but South Australia Attorney General Michael Atkinson is holding out. End quote. But why can't the decision over classification laws be put to the Parliament or a subordinate committee? Why must individual Attorneys General, all of them must agree, not majority, be the ones to decide? For ultra-right-wing, family values, moral elitist lobby groups, I believe they are behind this affair, as most Australians and politicians would think it's only fair to have a proper system for video game ratings. It's very easy to lobby an individual politician or bureaucrat, such as Attorney General or any other executive body, than it is a committee full of individual personalities or an entire parliament. Victorian Attorney General Rob Hulls hits the nail on the head when he made this comment, quote, it seems inconsistent that in Australia, adults are allowed to view adult-only films, which have been classified R18+ by the Classification Board, but not computer games with equivalently high-level content. End quote. For video game producers to make games for the Australian market, they have to censor the content, which means Australians get a lukewarm, diluted version of the product, not the real thing. The most common argument against video game R18 rating, not all video games, or certain types, only are rated, is that through playing a video game, you are participating in it and are therefore gaining a special connection with it. Quote, he said the interactive nature of video games meant they had much greater influence than viewing a film or reading a book. People are participating and acting out violence and criminal behaviour when they are playing a video game, he said. End quote. So I watch a movie, some movie, I don't know what, and I see a criminal shoot a pedestrian on the street. I play a video game, Grand Theft Auto maybe, and I make my character, for the sake of the argument he's a criminal, shoot a pedestrian on the street. Therefore, I'm getting an unhealthy connection to the criminal because I'm controlling his movements instead of merely watching them. Mr. Atkinson's arguments are weak at best and intellectually insulting at worst. First, it seems to be technological illiteracy, with Atkinson representing the old right-wing pundits who are scared of video games because they're new and different and hard to control, and these people don't want them in the society they're trying to manipulate and control with their moral elitism. He tries to make video games out as a modern perversion, poisoning people's minds, and that if you got rid of them, society would return to the wonderful times of the 1950s. The comments are insulting to the other mediums of entertainment. When I read a book or watch a movie, I'm naturally connected with the main character. I feel and think about them because I care about what happens to them. It's one of the basic fundamentals of good storytelling, to make the reader or viewer empathize with the protagonist. So for Atkinson to say that video games build a connection that is stronger than other mediums paints the image of them being inferior in terms of telling stories. And it's wrong. If I read a book about a person who commits an everyday act, let alone a sexual or violent one, through the building of empathy via storytelling, I will visualize myself doing that act and envision what it must feel like to do it. If this were not true, then fictional novels and storytelling movies would never have been popular and never had billions of viewers as they do now because of their dehumanized nature. The wall between artist and spectator would exist and could never be broken. But furthermore, Atkinson also makes out that video game players aren't smart enough to understand the difference between fantasy and reality, in which confusion is natural and obvious, and which interlacing would be organic and unavoidable. But if action comes from envisagement, then why were Warner Brothers cartoons, which are some of the most violent cartoons ever made, with dynamite and anvils and mousetraps and axes, ever banned? And what exactly does the separation between MA and R ratings create? If Atkinson is right, and video games are penetrating people's minds and turning them into violent sex monsters, then surely the evidence should be there from MA games as well. MA is no picnic. There is a lot of blood and guts and boobs and drugs. The R rating is to increase the tempo to the full, the maximum, as the game maker intended it to be. What evidence does Atkinson bring that can show this huge differentiation between these two classification ratings that sit side by side each other on the spectrum? I really don't think Atkinson knows what he's talking about. Here I am with a very medium-leveled analysis of the situation, and even I've been able to pull his arguments apart. You could just imagine the catastrophic damage a scholar who would spend a number of hours in research and development of ideas could do. However, if Atkinson's real beef is with a different issue in the classification portfolio, then he should say so. If he's worried about, for example, the sex and violence causing a perversion of young children, then that's an important issue that needs to have laws in place, as long as there's an open and constructive dialogue to the policies. The assumption of the correct consumer. The R rating debate and the protect children from harmful content debate are two separate issues, and they should be debated out separately. And that's all the time we have for today. This has been Come to Think of It on Bizz 99.9 FM Substitute Radio. I'm Gerik, no Deall. Thanks for listening to the program. Until next time, goodbye.